Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge of the starship Thunder Bay, watching the endless stars through the main screen, when the emergency alarm started screaming through every speaker on the ship. The sound made every crew member freeze because they had been on routine patrol for 3 months without seeing anything more dangerous than space dust and broken satellites from old mining operations. Communications Officer Bay Susie looked up from her station with wide eyes and said the words that would change everything for the human race. "The signal is coming from outside our solar system, sir, and it is not using any human communication protocols." Minho walked over to her station and looked at the strange patterns flowing across her screen, like waves of light that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. The signal repeated every 30 seconds in the same pattern, but the computer could not translate it into anything that made sense until Dr. Park So-young came running onto the bridge with her tablet in her hands. She was the ship's science officer and the smartest person Minho had ever met when it came to understanding things that did not make sense. "Doctor, what do you have for us?" "The signal is mathematical, sir, and it contains star charts that show the location where it came from, plus something else that looks like a distress call." She touched her tablet, and the main screen filled with numbers and symbols that hurt to look at because they seemed to move when nobody was watching them directly. "The source is 47 light-years away in the Kepler 1442 system, and whoever sent this signal has been broadcasting it for at least 6 months, based on the signal strength degradation." Lieutenant Commander Choi Jin-woo stepped forward from his position at the tactical station because he always worried about security first and asked questions later. "So this could be a trap set by hostile aliens or some kind of weapons test that we should avoid." Minho knew his second in command was right to be careful, but something about the signal felt different from anything threatening. The patterns were too complex and too desperate to be fake, and the mathematical precision suggested a civilization that understood science better than humans did. Engineer Kim Tae-hyung came onto the bridge carrying a heavy portable scanner that he had modified to analyze the alien transmission. "Captain, I have been studying this signal for 20 minutes, and I think I know what we are." Looking at, he connected his scanner to the main computer system, and suddenly the bridge filled with a sound like crystal bells ringing in harmony mixed with static electricity. "The aliens are transmitting on frequencies that should not be possible for normal matter to generate, and the signal contains what looks like technical specifications for faster-than-light communication." Minho felt his heart start beating faster, because this was the moment that every human had dreamed about since the first person looked up at the night sky. First contact with an alien civilization, but the signal was a distress call, which meant these aliens were in trouble and needed help from someone. Dr. Park So-young worked with her tablet for several more minutes, before she looked up with an expression that mixed excitement with horror. "Sir, I have translated more of the message and you need to hear this." She touched her tablet again and the speakers began playing a sound that was like music, mixed with screaming. "Are the Luminari and our world is dying. The creatures that eat minds have come to our system and they devour everything that thinks or dreams. Our weapons cannot harm them because they exist between spaces where matter has no meaning. We have heard stories of warriors from a death world called Earth who fight with such violence that even their own planet fears them. If any humans receive this message, please help us because we will all be dead before our next sunrise." The bridge became completely silent except for the humming of the ship's engines and the sound of people breathing too fast. Minho looked around at his crew and saw the same expression on every face. They were scared and excited and ready to do something that would either make them heroes or get them all killed. "Sir, we are not authorized to make first contact with alien species without approval from Earth." Command Choi Jin-woo was right about the regulations, but Minho knew that getting approval would take months, and the aliens would be dead long before any official response arrived. How long would it take us to reach their system? Kim Tae-hyung checked his calculations twice before answering. 18 days at maximum warp, sir, but we would be completely alone out there, with no support from other human ships. The alien signal played again through the speakers, and this time, everyone could hear the desperation hidden in the strange musical patterns. Dr. Park So-young translated more of the message in real time, and her voice shook as she spoke. "They say the mind-eaters have already consumed half their population, and they are hiding in the last city on their planet. They have no weapons that can fight these creatures, and no way to escape because their ships are too slow. They are asking for help from humans because they think we are the only species in the galaxy that might be violent enough to fight something that cannot be killed. Minho made the decision that would define the rest of his life, and possibly the future of humanity. Set course for the Kepler 442 system. Maximum Warp All Department heads to the briefing room in 10 minutes. We are going to help them, sir. The regulations clearly state that first contact situations require approval from Earth. Command and the Galactic Council. Choi Jinwoo was doing his job, but Minho had already made up his mind. The Galactic Council does not even know we exist yet, and Earth Command is 18 days away from making any decisions. Those aliens will be dead by the time we get permission to sneeze in their direction. We are going, and that is final. The next few hours were busy as the crew prepared for the longest, faster-than-light jump in human history. Dr. Park So-young worked with Kim Tae-hyung to modify the communication system so they could talk to the aliens when they arrived. Choi Jinwoo ran combat drills with the security teams because nobody knew what they would find when they reached the alien system. The ship Thunder Bay was joined by 4 other vessels from the patrol squadron. The heavy cruiser Seoul's Vengeance commanded by Captain Shin Ryujin, the destroyer Busan Strike with Captain Han Seojin, the science vessel New Seoul under Captain Yoon Nayeon, the fighter carrier Incheon's Pride, commanded by Captain Oh Hyunbin. Together, the 5 ships carried 800 human crew members and enough firepower to level a small moon. They were about to become the first humans to meet an alien species, and they were going to do it in the middle of a war zone. As the ships jumped to faster-than-light travel, Minho stood on his bridge watching the stars stretch into lines of light. He thought about the alien message and the creatures that ate minds. The Luminari had called Earth a death world and humans violent warriors. They were asking for help from people they thought were monsters. Minho wondered if they were right about humans being monsters, but he also knew that sometimes monsters were exactly what the universe needed. The Thunder Bay and her escort ships raced through space toward a dying world, carrying the hopes of an alien civilization that had never seen violence. They were about to learn what humans could do when someone asked for help. The journey would take 18 days, but Minho knew that the real journey was just beginning. When they arrived at Kepler 442, everything would change for both humans and aliens. The signal from the Luminari continued broadcasting its desperate plea across the empty space between stars, and 5 human warships answered that call with engines that burned bright as they carried Earth's first warriors to save an alien world from creatures that lived in nightmares. 18 days later, the 5 human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and everyone on every bridge stopped breathing when they saw what waited for them. The alien world hung in space like a broken jewel with half of its surface covered in darkness that moved and writhed like living shadow, where the planet should have glowed with the light of cities. There were only patches of dim flickering that looked like dying candles in a hurricane. Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge of the Thunder Bay staring at the main screen, while Dr. Park So-young worked frantically at her station, trying to make sense of the readings. The planet has a breathable atmosphere for humans, but the gravity is only 60% of Earth normal, and there are massive energy readings coming from the dark areas. She paused and looked up with confusion written across her face. Sir, the energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases, and they seem to be moving independently of the planet's rotation. Communications Officer Bae Suzy turned from her station with her hands shaking slightly as she spoke. Captain, we are receiving a response to our arrival signal, and it is not coming from the planet. Lieutenant Commander Choi Jinwoo immediately went to full alert and started scanning for hostile ships, while Engineer Kim Tae-hyung tried to boost the sensor range. Where is the signal coming from? From everywhere, sir, and nowhere at the same time. The alien voice that came through the speakers was like wind chimes made of starlight, mixed with the sound of water flowing over crystal. We are Elder Shimmer of Dawn, speaking for the Luminary who still live. You are the humans from the Death World Earth who answered our call for help. We did not think any species would be brave enough or foolish enough to come here. Minho stepped forward toward the main screen as if he could somehow get closer to the alien voice. This is Captain Lee Minho of the Human Defense Corps. We received your distress signal and we are here to help. Where are you located and what is your current situation? The laughter that came through the speakers was beautiful and terrible at the same time. We are located in the spaces between spaces, where matter becomes light and light becomes thought. But we can meet you on the surface of our world in the last city that still shines. Be warned that the Devourers sense all life and they will come for you as soon as you enter our atmosphere. Park So-young worked with the computer to establish better communication protocols, while Kim Tae-hyung prepared landing shuttles for the first contact team. Sir, I recommend we send down a small team initially to assess the situation before committing our full forces. Choi Jin-woo was being cautious as always, but Min-ho could see the excitement in his eyes. Despite his professional concern, agreed Dr. Park. You will lead the first contact team with a small security detail to Hyung. I want you there. To analyze their technology, I will command the shuttle myself. The shuttle bay of the Thunder Bay was busy with crew members preparing equipment for humanity's first meeting with an alien species. Dr. Park So-young packed translation devices and scientific instruments while Sergeant Kang Min-ji checked weapons and protective gear for the security team pilot. Lee Dong-hyuk ran through pre-flight checks on the shuttle, while Private Park Bogum loaded supplies and emergency medical equipment. The shuttle launched from the Thunder Bay and began its descent toward the alien world while the other 4 human ships maintained defensive positions around the system. As they entered the atmosphere, Min-ho could see through the shuttle windows that the planet was even more damaged than it had appeared from space. Massive crystal structures lay broken and scattered across continents, while cities that should have sparkled with alien technology were dark and lifeless. Only one area still glowed with the soft light that seemed to be natural to the luminary civilization. The shuttle set down in what appeared to be a landing area made of some kind of crystalline material that sang under their feet as they walked across it. The air was thin but breathable, and everything around them seemed to pulse with a gentle light that came from within the crystal structures themselves. Dr. Park So-young set up her translation equipment while Sergeant Kang Min-ji positioned her security team in a defensive perimeter. Buailai. First alien they saw was like nothing any human had ever imagined. Elder Shimmer of Dawn appeared as a column of living light that shifted between different colors and intensities, while somehow maintaining a roughly humanoid shape. When the alien spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once like sound made of liquid crystal. Welcome, humans from Earth, the world that births warriors. We are grateful that you have come, but we fear you may have arrived too late to save our people. Behind the elder appeared more luminary, and each one was beautiful in a way that made human eyes water to look at them directly. They were beings made of pure energy, contained within frameworks of living crystal, and they moved like dancers made of starlight. Dr. Park So-young stepped forward and activated her translation device while speaking slowly and clearly. We are honored to meet you, Elder Shimmer of Dawn. Can you tell us about these creatures that are attacking your people and why your weapons cannot harm them? The Elder's light dimmed and flickered like a candle in the wind. The Devourers came from the space between stars where matter has no meaning and energy becomes hunger. They feed on consciousness itself and grow stronger with every mind they consume. Our weapons are made of focused light and controlled energy, but the Devourers exist partially outside normal space where such things cannot touch them. As if summoned by the mention of their name, the sky above the crystal city suddenly began to darken. Sound like screaming mixed with static electricity filled the air, while shapes that hurt to look at directly began forming in the atmosphere. The Devourers had arrived. Sergeant Kang Min-ji immediately ordered her team to defensive positions, while shouting orders through her communication device. Contact. All ships, we have hostiles incoming. Unknown alien creatures approaching the landing zone. The creatures that descended from the sky were nightmares given form. They appeared as shifting masses of darkness that seemed to absorb light and sound while moving in ways that defied physics. They had no fixed shape, but constantly changed between different configurations of shadow and hunger. The luminary around the landing area began to panic, and their beautiful lights started flickering erratically. Elder Shimmer of Dawn's voice became urgent and afraid. You must return to your ships immediately. The Devourers will consume your minds as they have consumed ours. There is no defense against creatures that eat thoughts themselves. But Sergeant Kang Min-ji had other ideas. Her security team opened fire with their standard kinetic weapons, and something unexpected happened. The bullets and energy blasts that should have passed harmlessly through creatures made of shadow instead caused them to writhe and shriek in apparent pain. Park Soyoung stared in amazement as the Devourers began to retreat from the human weapons fire, the creatures that had been unstoppable against Luminari. Energy weapons were somehow vulnerable to human military technology. Engineer Kim Tae-hyung was already scanning the Devourers with his modified sensors and shouting his findings over the sound of gunfire. Captain, these creatures exist partially in subspace, but our weapons create quantum disruptions that affect both normal space and subspace simultaneously. Or kinetic projectiles are somehow damaging them on multiple dimensional levels. Elder Shimmer of Dawn's light brightened with something. That might have been hope your weapons harm the Devourers. How is this possible when our most powerful energy cannons pass through them without effect? Pilot Lee Dong-yuk had been monitoring the situation from the shuttle, and his voice came through everyone's communication devices. Sir, we have more Devourers incoming from multiple directions, and the main fleet is detecting massive movement throughout the system. I recommend immediate evacuation to plan our next move. Minho made the decision to retreat, but he could see that this first encounter had changed everything. The humans had found a way to fight creatures that the Luminary considered invincible. As the shuttle lifted off from the crystal landing area with the first contact team, aboard Minho watched the Devourers swarm around the city below. The beautiful crystal structures dimmed as the creatures fed on the consciousness of the Luminary trapped inside. But now there was hope, because humans had weapons that could hurt these nightmares. Dr. Park So-young worked frantically with her equipment during the flight back to the Thunder Bay. Sir, I am detecting that the Devourers seem to have some kind of adverse reaction to human neural patterns. Our brainwaves appear to create interference with their feeding process. Back on the ship, Minho called an emergency meeting with all ship captains. They had made first contact with an alien species and discovered an enemy that could be fought. The war for an alien world was about to begin, and humanity would fight it with weapons that the universe had never seen before. The Luminary had asked for help from the warriors of a death world. They were about to learn what that really meant. The War Council that met aboard the Thunder Bay 6 hours after first contact included the captains of all 5 human ships, and it was unlike any military meeting that had ever taken place. Captain Lee Minho stood at the head of the conference table looking at tactical displays that showed an enemy no human military academy had ever prepared them to fight. The Devourers moved through space in patterns that defied every rule of physics and strategy that humans understood. Captain Shin Ryu-jin, from the Soul's Vengeance, was the first to speak. Our weapons can hurt them, but we need to understand why before we commit to a full-scale engagement. The creatures appear to be vulnerable to kinetic impacts and energy discharges, but only under specific conditions. Dr. Park So-young had spent the last few hours analyzing data from their encounter, and her findings were disturbing. The Devourers exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, which explains why Luminary energy weapons cannot affect them, but human weapons create quantum disturbances that disrupt their dimensional anchoring. Captain Yoon Nyan from the science vessel, New Soul, leaned forward with interest. Are you saying that our primitive approach to warfare is somehow more effective than advanced alien technology? Engineer Kim Tae-hyung nodded while pointing at his scanner readings. Exactly. The Luminary fight with pure energy which exists in normal space. The Devourers have evolved to feed on energy-based life forms, so they developed immunity to energy attacks, but they never encountered species that use kinetic projectiles and explosive charges. Captain Han Seo-jun from the destroyer, Busan Strike, was already thinking like a soldier. So we have an advantage, but only if we can get close enough to use it. The question is, how many of these creatures are we facing and where are they coming from? Lieutenant Commander Choi Jin-woo had been studying the tactical situation, and his report was grim sensor readings indicate at least 50,000 individual Devourers throughout the system, with more arriving every hour. They appeared to be drawn to areas with high concentrations of conscious life. Major Han Seo-jun, who commanded the ground forces, spoke up from his position at the far end of the table. Sir, I recommend we establish a defensive perimeter around the last Luminary city and force the Devourers to come to us. That way we can control the engagement and use our weapons to maximum effect. Captain Oh Hyunbin from the fighter carrier. Incheon's pride had a different idea. My pilots are ready to take the fight directly to the enemy fighter craft. Should be able to outmaneuver these creatures and attack them from multiple angles. Minho looked around. The table at the faces of the people who would either save an alien civilization or die trying. These captains and officers were about to implement tactics that had never been used against an enemy that should not exist. Dr. Park Soyoung activated her portable scanner and connected it to the main conference display. I have been analyzing the neural patterns of the Devourers, and I think I understand how they feed. They absorb consciousness by creating resonance with brainwave patterns. But human thoughts are chaotic compared to luminary mental processes. Our minds create interference that disrupts their feeding. Sergeant Kang Minji had been listening from her position near the door, and she stepped forward. Ma'am, are you saying that just thinking human thoughts can hurt these creatures? Because if that is true, then we have a weapon they cannot defend against. The idea that formed in that moment would become known throughout the galaxy as the Deathworld Doctrine. Humans would not just fight the Devourers with weapons, they would fight them with the violence and chaos that lived inside every human mind. Kim Taehyung was already working on modifications to their communication systems. If we can broadcast human neural patterns directly at the Devourers, we might be able to weaponize our own thoughts. Captain Minho made the decision that would define the battle. We are going to do something that no military force has ever attempted. We are going to use our humanity as a weapon. All ships will move to defensive positions around the Luminary City ground forces. We'll establish a perimeter and prepare for close combat fighter squadrons. We'll engage the Devourers in open space. And our science teams will turn our own minds into weapons of war. The next 12 hours were the most intense preparation period in human military history. Dr. Yoon Nayeon worked with her science team to modify every communication array in the fleet to broadcast human brainwave patterns. Sergeant Kang Minji trained her Marines in tactics for fighting enemies that could phase through solid matter. Pilot Lee Dong-hyuk ran combat simulations with fighter pilots who were preparing to dogfight with creatures from nightmares. Engineer Kim Taehyung developed new ammunition types designed to create maximum quantum disruption. The human fleet moved into position around the dying alien world, while the Devourers gathered in the darkness between stars. Elder Shimmer of Dawn and the surviving Luminary watched from their crystal city as human warships took defensive positions. The aliens had never seen military formations designed for protection rather than retreat. Communications Officer Bei Suzy established contact with the Luminary leadership. Elder, we are ready to begin our defense of your city. Can you evacuate your people to the strongest structures you have remaining? The aliens' response was filled with confusion and fear. Human Captain Minho, your ships are so small compared to the Devourer swarms. How can you protect us when we could not protect ourselves? The answer came 6 hours later when the Devourers launched their first major attack. 50,000 creatures of living shadow descended on the Crystal City like a nightmare made real, but they met something they had never encountered before. Human beings who fought not just to win but to completely destroy anything that threatened their packfighter squadrons. Led by pilot Lee Dong-hyuk, engaged the Devourers in space while broadcasting recordings of human memories. The creatures that tried to feed on these artificial thoughts were overwhelmed by images of warfare hunting and survival. Private Park Bogum was part of the 1st Marine Unit to face Devourers in ground combat, and he learned something that would terrify the enemy. When a Devourer tried to feed on his consciousness, it encountered memories of growing up on Earth, a world where children learned to fight before they learned to walk, where survival meant being more dangerous than everything else in the environment. The creature recoiled from his mind like it had touched something poisonous. Sergeant Kang Minji led her Marines in the first successful ground assault against a Devourer nest. Her soldiers used explosives and kinetic weapons while thinking about every violent movie and video game they had ever experienced. The Devourers found themselves trying to feed on minds filled with programmed aggression and tactical violence. Dr. Park Soyoung discovered that human emotions were even more effective than human memories. When Marines fought while angry or protective or determined, the Devourers could not process the intensity. These aliens had spent eons feeding on peaceful energy beings who thought in harmony and light. Human minds were chaos engines that ran on conflict and competition. Major Han Seojin established the first permanent defensive position using tactics that horrified the luminary. His soldiers deliberately exposed themselves to devourer attacks while thinking about sacrifice and honor. The creatures that tried to consume these thoughts found neural patterns that included willingness to die for strangers. Something completely outside their experience, Captain. Shin Ryujin commanded the Soul's Vengeance in the first successful ship-to-ship engagement with a devourer mothership. Her crew broadcast human war songs and battle cries while firing every weapon they had. The massive shadow creature that had been feeding on luminary thoughts for months suddenly found itself facing minds that glorified violence. Engineer Kim Tae-hyung reported the results of the first day's fighting to the command staff. Sir, the devourers are beginning to avoid direct contact with human forces. They seem to be learning that our neural patterns are toxic to their feeding process. We are not just fighting them, we are poisoning them with our thoughts. Lieutenant Commander Choi Jinwoo had been coordinating the overall battle, and his strategic assessment was clear. The enemy is retreating, but not because we are killing them faster than they expected. They are retreating because they cannot feed while we are here. Our presence is starving them. That night, the Luminary sent a message to the human fleet that would be remembered for generations. Elder Shimmer of Dawn's voice carried wonder and terror in equal measure. Human warriors, we begin to understand why your world is called a place of death. You do not just survive violence, you have made violence serve life. You fight not because you enjoy destruction, but because you will destroy anything that threatens those who cannot destroy it themselves. Captain Minho stood on his bridge looking out at a battlefield where humans had proven that sometimes the most primitive weapons were exactly what the universe needed. The Devourers had ruled this system for months. Now they were learning to fear the thoughts of creatures from a world where thinking about violence was as natural as breathing. The war was far from over, but the tide had turned. Humanity had brought something to this alien world that the Devourers had never faced. The controlled chaos of minds that had evolved to turn destruction into protection. 3 days into the battle for the Luminary homeworld, Dr. Yoon Nayeon made the discovery that would change warfare throughout the galaxy. She was working in her laboratory aboard the science vessel New Seoul when she realized that human psychological patterns could be concentrated and weaponized. Captain, I have successfully created what I am calling neural minds devices that record and replay human combat memories in concentrated bursts. When a devourer attempts to feed on these artificial thoughts, they experience the equivalent of psychological poison. Captain Lee Minho reviewed her data while the battle raged around the crystal city below. Doctor, this could be the breakthrough we need. How quickly can you manufacture these devices? Dr. Yoon Nayeon was already working with her technical team to mass-produce the neural minds. We can have 50 units ready within 6 hours. Sir, each mind contains recorded memories from our most aggressive Marines, plus amplified emotional responses. The psychological impact should be devastating to creatures that feed on consciousness. Meanwhile, pilot Lee Dong-hyuk was leading fighter squadrons in the most unusual air combat missions in military history. His pilots had learned to use their own thoughts as weapons. While engaging devourers in 3-dimensional dogfights, Red Squadron Leader to Thunder Bay Actual, we have confirmed that aggressive thinking patterns disrupt devourer movement coordination. Recommend all pilots maintain combat meditation during engagement. The combat meditation he referred to was a technique developed by psychological warfare specialist Oh Hyunbin. Human pilots would focus their minds on memories of hunting, predatory instincts, and territorial protection while flying their fighters. The result was that devourers attempting to attack the human ships found themselves trying to feed on neural patterns that included detailed knowledge of how to kill. Captain Oh Hyunbin had been studying the psychological effects of the conflict, and his reports were fascinating. Sir, the devourers appear to experience something similar to indigestion when they encounter human military thoughts. Our minds contain tactical information, weapon specifications, and strategic planning. When they try to absorb this information, it conflicts with their own feeding instincts. Sergeant Kang Minji had been leading ground operations, and she discovered something even more significant. The devourers were not just avoiding human thoughts. They were beginning to fear human presence entirely. Ma'am, I have observed devourer behavioral changes over the past 48 hours. They now retreat from areas where humans have been present even after we withdraw. It appears our neural patterns leave some kind of residual effect. Dr. Park So-young analyzed these reports and realized the implications. The devourers had evolved to feed on energy-based consciousness. Human brains were organic chemical biological systems that processed information in completely different ways to creatures that fed on pure thought. Human minds were like eating food that had been contaminated. Chief Petty Officer Kim Yuna led the first successful boarding operation against a devourer ship. Her team used modified environmental suits that broadcast human memories while they planted explosives throughout the enemy vessel. The devourers on board were so disrupted by exposure to human neural patterns that they could not coordinate their defenses. Captain Shin Rujin commanded the Soul's Vengeance in the first major fleet engagement with devourer forces. Her crew had learned to synchronize their thoughts during combat. 800 human minds, all focused on the same tactical objectives while feeling the same protective rage. The devourers found themselves facing a level of coordinated aggression that overwhelmed their feeding mechanisms. Ensign Lee Chae-young was monitoring sensor readings during the battle when she made an important discovery. Captain, the devourers are beginning to communicate with each other using frequency patterns we have not seen before. It appears they are trying to develop new feeding strategies. Engineer Kim Tae-hyung intercepted these communications and his translation was disturbing. Sir, the devourers are calling human minds poison food. They are warning each other to avoid direct neural contact with our species. They have never encountered consciousness that fights back from the inside. Major Han Seojin had established forward operating bases around the Luminary City using tactics that confused both allies and enemies. His soldiers built defensive positions designed to attract devourer attacks. Then they would ambush the creatures with concentrated bursts of human psychological warfare. The devourers would approach expecting to feed on helpless consciousness. Instead, they encountered minds that had been trained to think about violence. Professionally, Commander Song Hyeben led a special operations team that infiltrated the largest devourer concentration on the planet. Her soldiers carried neural broadcasting equipment that transmitted recordings of human war movies mixed with actual combat memories. The psychological assault was so effective that an entire devourer nest abandoned its feeding grounds. Private Park Bogum participated in the most dangerous mission of the campaign, a direct assault on what appeared to be a devourer command structure. His squad fought their way through creatures made of living shadow while broadcasting human thoughts about sacrifice, duty, and brotherhood. The devourers that tried to feed on these concepts found neural patterns they could not understand, consciousness that willingly chose pain and death to protect others. Dr. Park So-young made the theoretical breakthrough that explained why human minds were so effective against the devourers. I believe the creatures evolved to feed on species that think in terms of harmony and collective consciousness. Human minds are fundamentally individualistic and competitive. When devourers try to absorb human thoughts, they encounter millions of years of evolutionary programming designed for survival through conflict communications. Officer Bae Suzy had been monitoring alien communications throughout the system. Captain, we are receiving surrender signals from multiple devourer formations. They appear to be requesting permission to withdraw from the system. Elder Shimmer of Dawn contacted the human fleet with disbelief in the alien's crystalline voice. Human Captain Minho. The creatures that consumed our civilization for months are fleeing from your thoughts. How is it possible that minds from a death world can frighten beings that exist between dimensions? The answer came from Lieutenant Commander Choi Jin-woo, who had been studying human military psychology. Sir, the devourers are predators that evolved to hunt prey. But humans are predators that evolved to hunt other predators. Our thoughts contain information about how to kill things that are designed to kill. When the devourers encounter this information, they realize they have become the prey. Captain. Yoon Naeon deployed the first large-scale neural minefield around the devourer mothership. 50 devices, broadcasting concentrated human aggression, created a barrier that the creatures could not cross. The mothership that had been feeding on luminary consciousness for months was suddenly trapped by an invisible wall of human psychological warfare. Pilot Lee Dong-yuk led the final fighter assault on the devourer mothership. His squadron flew through the neural minefield while their minds were focused on hunting instincts and pack behavior. The creatures inside the mothership were so overwhelmed by exposure to human predatory thoughts that they lost the ability to coordinate their defenses. The boarding party, led by Sergeant Kang Minji, entered the mothership and discovered something unexpected. The Devourers were not evil creatures bent on destruction. They were a corrupted species that had lost the ability to sustain themselves naturally. Dr. Park So-young analyzed the data from inside the mothership and made a shocking discovery. Sir, these creatures were once similar to the Luminari. They are energy-based beings that became addicted to feeding on consciousness when their own energy sources were depleted. They have been driven mad by eons of artificial feeding, and they no longer remember how to exist without consuming other minds. Engineer Kim Tae-hyung found the key to ending the conflict in the mothership's central chamber, a massive biomechanical device that had been converting the Devourers' natural energy processes into a hunger for consciousness. Captain Minho made the decision that would save two species. We are not going to destroy the Devourers, we are going to cure them. Dr. Yoon Nayeon and her team worked with Luminari technology to reverse the corruption that had turned peaceful energy beings into mind-eating monsters. The process required human neural patterns to provide the psychological strength needed to break the addiction to consciousness feeding. When the first Devourer was successfully cured, it appeared as a being of soft light, similar to the Luminari, but with patterns that showed the scars of its long hunger. The cured creature communicated with trembling energy that translated as deep shame and gratitude. We remember now what we were before the hunger consumed us. The warriors from the death world have given us back our souls. The battle ended not with destruction but with healing. The Devourers who chose to be cured were restored to their original nature. Those who refused the cure were driven from the system by the threat of human psychological warfare. The Luminari rebuilt their civilization with human protection, and the galaxy learned that the most dangerous species in the universe were also the most compassionate. Captain Minho stood on his bridge watching both Luminari and reformed Devourers working together to rebuild the Crystal Cities. The Deathworlders had brought something to the stars that no other species possessed. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, Captain Lee Minho stood in the council chambers of New Lumina, watching representatives from 47 different alien species debate whether humans should be allowed to join the Galactic Council. The chamber was a marvel of crystal architecture that sang with harmonious frequencies when the different alien voices spoke. But today the harmony was broken by arguments and fear. The Zephyrian ambassador was a tall, blue-skinned being who spoke through electromagnetic pulses that translated as barely controlled terror. The humans from Earth have demonstrated military capabilities that exceed anything in our databases. They defeated an enemy that had consumed entire star systems. How do we know they will not turn these weapons against peaceful species? Admiral Park Jin-young, who had arrived with the official Galactic Council fleet 3 months too late to help in the battle, responded with diplomatic patience. Ambassador, the human forces acted only in defense of the Luminari civilization. They had every opportunity to conquer this system, and chose instead to heal their enemies. The debate had been going on for weeks as more alien species learned about what humans had accomplished. Dr. Park So-young was now serving as humanity's chief xenobiological advisor, and she had spent months explaining human psychology to confused alien diplomats. The crystalline collective representative spoke through harmonic resonances that hurt human ears. Species from the death world Earth exhibits contradictory behaviors that do not match any known psychological models. They display extreme aggression followed by protective nurturing. How can consciousness contain such opposing traits without mental collapse? The answer came from an unexpected source. Echo of Starlight was a young Luminari who had worked closely with human forces during the battle. The humans think in patterns we had never encountered before. They can hold violence and compassion in their minds simultaneously without conflict. This is what makes them dangerous to enemies and safe for allies. Captain Shin Ryujin was representing the human military delegation, and her testimony about the battle had shocked the council. We could have destroyed the Devourer mothership and eliminated the threat permanently. Instead, our forces chose to attempt a cure that put human lives at risk. This decision was made not by our commanders, but by individual soldiers who refused to kill an enemy that could be saved. The council chamber fell silent as aliens tried to process the concept of warriors who chose mercy over victory. Elder Shimmer of Dawn spoke for the luminary with voice patterns that conveyed deep gratitude. The humans came to our world when we were hours from extinction. They fought creatures that existed between dimensions using weapons we considered primitive. But their greatest weapon was not their technology. Their greatest weapon was their refusal to let anyone die if they could prevent it. Quantum Singer was a luminary scientist who had been studying human neural patterns since the battle. I have analyzed the psychological data from human combat operations. These beings carry the capacity for violence that exceeds any species in our records, but they also carry prohibitions against using this violence except in protection of others. It is as if their evolution created perfect predators who chose to become guardians. Commander Song Hyeben had been working with the reformed Devourers to establish their new colony. Her report to the Council described something unprecedented in galactic history. The creatures that once consumed consciousness now work alongside their former prey. This was only possible because humans provided the psychological framework for forgiveness. Our species understands that enemies can become allies if given the opportunity to change. The tentacled hegemony representative was a mass of writhing appendages that communicated through chemical signals. The humans demonstrate capabilities that suggest their homeworld produces warriors specifically, yet their actions indicate they use these capabilities only for protection. This paradox disturbs our understanding of predator. Species development engineer Kim Tae-hyung had been sharing human technology with alien scientists, and his reports amazed the Council. Sir, the aliens have energy weapons that can destroy mountains. They have faster-than-light travel that exceeds our capabilities. They have technology that we will need centuries to understand, but none of their advanced science could solve the problem that our simple kinetic weapons solved in hours. The debate was interrupted by an emergency transmission from the Outer System Communications Officer Bae Suzy, who was now serving as humanity's chief diplomatic communications specialist, received the message, Admiral. We have incoming ships from an unknown species, broadcasting what appears to be a distress signal. They are requesting assistance from the humans who defeated the Mind-Eaters. Admiral Park Jin-young looked at Captain Minho with an expression that mixed pride and concern. Captain, it appears your squadron's reputation has spread throughout the galaxy. We are receiving requests for human military assistance from 17 different systems. Major Han Seojun, who had been training alien military forces in human tactics, reported the growing demand. Sir, we have requests to establish human military academies on 12 different worlds. They want to learn what they call Death World combat doctrine, but they also want to learn human rules of engagement and protection of civilian populations. The irony was not lost on anyone in the chamber. The galaxy's most peaceful species were asking the galaxy's most violent species to teach them how to fight. But they were also asking to learn human concepts of honor, mercy, and sacrifice. Dr. Yoon Nayeon had been working with alien medical teams to understand the psychological cure they had developed for the Devourers. The healing process requires exposure to neural patterns that include both aggression and compassion. Only human minds naturally contain this combination in sufficient intensity. This means humans may be the only species capable of treating consciousness-based parasites and addictions. Sergeant Kang Minji was now training alien military units, and her observations had surprised everyone. Ma'am, these alien soldiers are physically superior to humans in almost every way. They are stronger, faster, and more durable. But they cannot think tactically under pressure because their minds are not adapted for violence. They need human advisors. Not because we are better warriors, but because we understand warfare psychologically. Private Park Bogum had become something of a celebrity among young aliens who wanted to understand human courage. His interviews were broadcast throughout the galaxy. The scary part is not that humans are willing to die for strangers. The scary part is that we think this is normal behavior. Most species cannot understand why we would risk our lives for people we just met. Captain O. Hyunbin was establishing the first integrated human-alien military units. His pilots were working with alien crews who brought superior technology to human tactics. The combination was proving devastatingly effective against hostile forces throughout the region. Sir, we are creating military capabilities that exceed anything either species could accomplish alone. The aliens provide the technology and we provide the strategic thinking. Together we are becoming something the galaxy has never seen before. The council debate reached its conclusion when Elder Shimmer of Dawn made a formal statement. The humans from Earth came to our world as strangers. They fought for us as family. They healed our enemies as if those enemies were their own wounded children. Any species capable of such actions deserves a place among the stars. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was admitted to the Galactic Council with full membership and the right to establish military bases throughout Council space. But the real victory was not political. Captain Minho received a message from Earth Command that changed his life. You and your squadron are ordered to establish the first human galactic defense corps. Your mission is to respond to threats that cannot be handled by conventional alien military forces. You have proven that human nature is exactly what the galaxy needs. Lieutenant Commander Choi Jin-woo was promoted to Admiral and given command of the expanding human fleet. Dr. Park So-young became the first human ambassador to the Galactic Council. Engineer Kim Tae-hyung established the Human Technology Exchange Program 1 year after the Battle of Kepler. Harner 42. Captain Minho stood on the observation deck of the new human embassy on New Lumina. The crystal city below sparkled with lights from dozens of different species who had come to work with humans. In the distance he could see the memorial to the devourers who had chosen healing over hunger. Children from multiple species played together in parks where luminary energy beings taught human children to sing with light. The galaxy had learned that the creatures from the death world Earth were not monsters. They were protectors who carried the strength to fight anything that threatened those who could not fight for themselves. Communications Officer Bae Suzy brought him the daily reports. Sir, we have received 43 new requests for human military assistance, 12 applications for admission to human military academies, and 6 proposals for joint colonization efforts. Captain Minho smiled as he looked out at the stars. The galaxy was a safer place because humans had answered a call for help, and it would continue to be safe as long as someone was willing to ask humans for assistance. The Deathworlders Squadron had become the guardians of 1,000 worlds. Their legacy was written, not in the enemies they had destroyed, but in the lives they had saved and the peace they had protected. Elder Shimmer of Dawn joined him at the observation window.